We're back with politics again, and we meet to discuss another interesting story. Is Mustafa. My name is Afolabi, and welcome to another political show.
Okay, whether you want to admit it or not, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, the axis of resistance is actually winning the war against Israel and Iran. Not in Iran, Israel and the US. And I want to be clear on what I mean by the axis of resistance. So you're having Iran, then you're having Lebanon through Hezbollah, and even in Syria now, you're having Iraqi militant groups which are in Syria, which are sending missiles to Israel. Then you also have the Yemeni forces, the Houthis, coming from the south. So this is a war that Israel is fighting on four fronts. They're having to deal with a direct and ceaseless missile strikes, which have shut down their economy and have made their citizens have to live underground, and is destroying key infrastructure and buildings from Iran, which clearly has saturated them and made them defenseless to their missiles in two ways. Saturated them, they're defenseless in that they can't intercept the missiles whether they had them or not. I'm pretty sure at this point that at least 40 to 80% of Iran's missiles are landing. Even 20% would be too much. And also defenseless in that Iran has destroyed billions of dollars of satellites in the Middle East and in Israel, which are able to see these missiles coming. So they don't know when the missiles are coming also. So they're blind. And even when they can see, if they do see, they can't intercept the missiles that are coming. And this is going to bring Israel's economy to its knee if, as what they want, it's going to be a long, long war. Now let's look at what's going on in Lebanon. Lebanon is trying to do a ground invasion into Lebanon, which is not working very well. A lot of Lebanese people are getting slaughtered. Some Israeli people are getting slaughtered. But what they're doing is they're sending young men who, either if they don't die, they should be working in banks, working in factories, working IT. They're sending young men to fight these Lebanese people to try to occupy, and they're not gaining any ground. And at the same time, Lebanon is also sending missiles to them, which are landing at a high rate. Now, to make things worse for Iran, I mean for Israel and the United States, is that Iraq is within Iraq. They are destroying U.S. assets, bases, embassies, going after soldiers. Soldiers are hiding. Soldiers are also hiding in the UAE um, where Iran is sending missiles to bases. They're hiding in hotels and places, cowering for fear for their lives. So you've got Iraq now involved, and also Iraq is involved in Syria. So basically, Syria now is a staging ground for assaults and attacks for Iraqi who are also aligned with the axis of resistance, which is led by Iran. Then you have the Houthis who have the threat of shutting down the Red Sea. And if that happens, you can forget what the oil prices are going to look like. They're shutting down, and they're also striking Israel from the south. I've looked at the map. Israel is about 1/100th of the size of Iran. So I don't know how they think they can maintain a war. The only thing that Israel has is expensive weaponry from the U.S., and they're using it up. They're going to have to use it up. And basically, I think they're going to be the first army to be out of this war, and then it's just going to be basically the U.S. fighting all of these guys, and that's what we're going to have, a war of attrition. So when I say that the Axis of Resistance is going to win, this is going to be between the U.S. and the Axis of Resistance, and it's going to be as to who is going to give up first. We know through history, whether it's Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, North Korea, the U.S. will never have the endurance to sustain a war, not because they don't have the weaponry, but because it will become too expensive for them in human life and also economically for them to sustain a forever war. So clearly, the axis of resistance is winning. And I want people to realize that when you think about the axis of resistance, you're not thinking about Iran being discrete and separate from Lebanon. You're not thinking about those two countries being discrete from Iraq. You're not thinking about them being discrete from the Houthis. You're actually dealing with what I would call a de facto nation on itself. It's a bunch of allies like NATO. It's just like NATO, even closer than NATO because they're all connected. And their one goal is to defeat the US and push them out so that they're no longer an hegemony in the Middle East. And the reason they don't want them to be an hegemony in the Middle East is because their goal is to continue gaining more land for Israel at the expense of the life of non-Arab Muslims in the Middle East. So what I'm talking about, the Arabs are the Saudis and people from Qatar and UAE. They're going after Persians, Iraqis, and Syrians and Lebanese who are not Arab, and that's not going to happen because these people are defending their homeland, and that's going to be an advantage for them, even if the U.S. has a ton of bombs and missiles that they can continue pushing forward into perpetuity. And the last thing I'll say is that the U.S. Is running out of missiles being able to attack from long distance. So now they're going to have to start flying planes to bomb Iran. And we just saw what happened yesterday. Two confirmed planes shot down. Most likely it was two planes, one helicopter. It was actually three planes and one helicopter that was shot down yesterday. So we've reached a point of the war where this is just too expensive for the United States, and they have nothing to lose because it's over. The Strait of Hormuz is controlled by Iran. Iran controls its own oil. So the U.S. only has pride to lose, but they're not going to lose their nation. They're not going to lose their power in the world as far as a multipolar power, but they're no longer going to be an hegemon that can just come to the Middle East and think that you're not going to be fought back by Iran, Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen. What are your thoughts, Afolabi?
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. I mean, this decapitation of Ali Khamenei, if for anything, has reinforced the axis of resistance, which for me is a very formidable hydra now. And there's a hydra of Hezbollah itself, because now you have a Syrian wing of Hezbollah, basically using the Syria as a launch pad. Basically, what they do is that they've dug deep into southern Syria, and what they're doing is that they have now made Israel to concentrate on two fronts. They are splitting Israel's vigilance and weakening their effectiveness. Basically, the IDF can't just guard the northern border with Lebanon. They have to fight a high-intensity war on the eastern border at the same time. Basically, they want to wear out and stretch Israel to breaking point. They are basically constantly, threatening Israel in the Golan Heights. Hezbollah forces, they split the Israeli air defenses, their troops, and their attention is being split into two fronts. So this is weakening their effectiveness. So basically what they do is they blend in. They use highly camouflaged, decentralized launch sites, right near the border. Then they smuggle weapons through some established, local routes, often while the Syrian authorities, who are complicit nation, just basically turn a blind eye and look away. They are also part of the coordinated wing of assault against US and Israel. So this is a very, very formidable strategy. It's working a T for Iran and its allies. The strikes from Syria might not be as heavy as the ones coming from Lebanon, but they do exactly what they are meant to do: force Israel to constantly burn through its expensive Iron Dome and David Sling interceptors. And if you look at the Iraqi wing too, that's the Iraqi resistance in Iraq, these militias are treating the Syrian border like a revolving door. It shows that they are not just a local problem in Iraq, but a regional force. And this is bad news for US and the American forces, basically,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
they're constantly being dragged into attacks on their regional bases. They want to be relentless. They want to put daily pressure on US and Israeli targets. They want to make the coalition pay a constant price for the border war with Iran. So this is a very formidable one. And they use Syria as a giant shield. Syria itself pretends to be neutral, but they're complicit, by firing drones and missiles from Syrian soil. They protect their own leaders and bases back in Iraq from direct retaliation. So it just muddles up the waters for Israel and US, making it harder to figure out exactly who fired what. And this is also very, very formidable, because it's wearing the US and Israel down psychologically and financially, because by firing dozens of cheap drones and missiles, they exhaust the coalition's tracking systems. And like you rightly mentioned when you opened the story this evening, you said they have become blind because most of these interceptors and sophisticated systems can't see anymore. So it's becoming harder and more difficult for the US to continue in this war. And I dare say the axis of resistance, along with Iran themselves, are winning.
Yeah, yeah, unfortunately. By the
Unfortunately.
way, unfortunately, by the way, I think Israel, you know why they're blind? Too much Gary, eating too much
Yeah,
Gary. Cut down on that.
they've been sipping Gary too much.
Too much. You got to stop sipping that Gary, and also whatever else you're sipping that made you mad enough to get into this war,
Yeah.
which I think Israel believe that they're winning. In that, here's why I think they believe they're winning, and they may have a point. They believe they're winning while the U.S. and Iran and the Axis of Resistance are losing. They're winning in that U.S. and Iran are also wearing themselves out to fight them, and meanwhile they're just under the ground. So Israel can rebuild its buildings and stuff like that, and
No, but
these citizens are underground.
I think Israel is the most vulnerable here. They are banking on the fact that US
So
will
they
stay,
think the U.S. will buy them. We'll bring them out of it.
yes, they think the US will stay in this for as long as possible. But the
Yeah,
moment the US ceases to exist in this war, Israel is finished, basically.
they're finished.
Israel is
They're
finished.
finished. And I believe that if the U.S. ceases to exist from this war, what will happen is Israel will very quickly try to come up with a peace treaty to end this thing. You get my point? Because if they don't, then they're in big trouble. Because if the U.S. ends out of it and doesn't continue giving them weapons for war, with after a year of not getting military support from them, these countries can just eat up Israel. Because what's saving Israel now? The only thing saving them is their air superiority and their missiles, all of which are provided from the U.S. If the U.S. stops funding that, so I think if the U.S. pulls out, they'll still help them financially to keep the war going.
Yeah,
But it's not sustainable.
it's
It's
not.
not
It's
sustainable.
not. It's
It's
not.
not sustainable.
It's not.
It's just not
It's not.
sustainable. All right, I follow you. A good one. Take us out.
Yeah, it's been another brilliant political show. We have been discussing how Syria has been used as a launch pad to accentuate the formidable strategy of the axis of resistance being backed by Iran, and this is becoming very, very, dairy for the US and Israel. And as we continue to monitor all this situation, we'll be back again with another interesting political story. From Mustafa and myself, it's bye for now.
All right, press stop for a second.
All right.
I said, no, stop, press record, take record off. I don't want them to hear me.
Okay.
Take record off. Hey, look, you know what?